behind him, and in some ways, they're more hardline than he is. And I remember in the lead up to Rabah, there was talk about, there's some elements in the regime that that don't want to go in with too much force, and there was an internal debate about that. And Muhammad al-Baradei was on one side of that debate, and so on. Now, I remember hearing pretty smart, otherwise good people essentially saying, Sisi's too soft on the Brotherhood. Why has he waited so long? Why hasn't he gone in already and wiped them all? I mean, you heard this kind of language. So Sisi has to be responsive to his base. So even if he wanted to support national reconciliation, one of the main reasons Sisi is popular is because he's the anti-Brotherhood guy. He's the guy who destroyed and will continue to destroy the Muslim Brotherhood. If he started talking about national reconciliation and releasing Brotherhood members, there would be a lot of Egyptians who would start criticizing him publicly and maybe even turning against him. He's created a monster that he can no longer control. He allowed this pro-Sisi populist sentiment to just take over parts of Egypt like a wave, and now he doesn't have control over that phenomenon. So in some sense, he's a prisoner of the sentiment that he himself created. Now, it's interesting because I remember, before the Arab Spring started, Egyptians would always say things like, we have no history of political violence. We're not like the Algerians. We don't kill each other. And the Egyptians so Egypt is one of the most messed up countries in the world, but at least we don't kill each other, right? But what's so interesting now is we have a real new phenomenon in Egyptian public life, which is civil conflict, which is before civil war. So essentially where one group of citizens kills another group of citizens or vice versa, which has no real precedent, at least not at this level, in at least modern Egyptian history. Now, and we found out too that the tolerance of some Egyptians, their tolerance for brutality is somewhat high. That they're willing to accept a lot in the name of stability and security. And then fourth factor, and this goes back to the ideological divide that I talked about earlier, because the Islamist, non-Islamist divide is so raw, and it's not easily forgotten, that you're going to have a lot of difficulty forming a united opposition front. So April 6th, leftists, anyone who's non-Islamist or let's say secular, who starts to get disillusioned with Sisi, there's not a natural place for them in terms of a broad alliance. And unfortunately, I think the Legitimacy Alliance and the Anti-Coup Alliance have become very Islamist-centered and Brotherhood-dominated. And that's the perception now. So whether that's fair or unfair, that's what a lot of people think. So it's hard to see how you have an umbrella that brings everyone together, and you still have such a fundamental level of distrust between Islamists and non-Islamists within the opposition. But even within the coalition, you see a degree of distrust between the Brotherhood and other members of the alliance, and between other members of the alliance. So we have a divided opposition. Now, so those are the four factors, and that those are all big problems. Now, another problem is that there just isn't, and this is a criticism you hear a lot. So I was in London and Doha for part of the past 2 weeks, doing interviews with Brotherhood and Salafi activists in the coalition, and there's a sense, especially from those who are not in the Brotherhood, that there's a lack of vision and strategy. And part of this is to be expected because there is no good strategy. I mean, the opposition is in a very tough spot. So they don't have a lot of good options. But I think really when people ask me, how would you describe the Brotherhood strategy? I think it really comes down to protest, and then see what happens. Or to put it differently, it's a revolutionary approach trying to create a January 25th moment, create a critical mass of opposition, and then the regime won't be able to resist that. And a big part of that is making Egypt ungovernable. And I don't want to use too pejorative of a term, but I think it's fair to say that it's effectively indirect economic sabotage. The Brotherhood and other opposition groups, they want to undermine any potential economic recovery because they don't, if the economy gets better, Sisi might gain support. If the economy gets worse, he'll lose support. It's not rocket science. So the Brotherhood has an interest in undermining any kind of economic growth or economic stabilization. I mean, so I guess you'd call that a strategy, but it's not a very affirmative or positive vision for change. Now, there was the Brussels and the Cairo declarations over the past month, but it doesn't seem like those were very effective, and they lost steam very quickly. And this gets us back to internal divisions in the coalition. One of the issues that got a lot of people annoyed with the Brussels declaration is that there's a whole story behind it, but basically the Brotherhood was supposed to stay away from it because the fear was that if the Brotherhood took ownership over it, it would taint it as a Brotherhood initiative and others wouldn't want to join because it would be the same old Brotherhood domination of the opposition. But right when it came out, and Ayman Noor was very involved in it, and others as well, the Brotherhood released a statement saying that, you know, we support this, like coming up very, very quickly and saying, yes, we support it. And that was an issue, and there were similar issues with the Cairo Declaration. And I just actually got an email from one of my trusted contacts who's in the Istanbul part of the opposition in exile, and he's working closely with members of the alliance and people like Hussein al-Azzaz and the Brotherhood in Istanbul. And as you know, like the Doha and Istanbul groups are a little bit different, and I would say the Doha group, led by Mahmoud Hussein, the Secretary General of the Brotherhood, is a little bit more kind of old school, if you will, old guard, conservative, hardline, and some of the people in Istanbul are trying to push and be a little bit more creative. So one of the key figures in Istanbul emailed me a couple days ago, and he's like, Shadi, just want to let you know, I think it's fair to say now that the old guard has won the internal debate in the Brotherhood. I take it with a grain of salt because it's very fluid and that can change. You know, we don't know exactly what's happening internally, but his sense is that it's going in that direction. And in a lot of the interviews I had, especially in Doha, from non-Brotherhood people, there were these concerns that were raised that the coalition isn't going in the direction they'd like, and a lot of complaints about Mahmoud Hussein in particular. Now, as I just kind of close up here, a couple points, quick points. Another key tension I think to watch out for is, as I said earlier, the Brotherhood is fundamentally a gradualist organization historically, and very much centered around the idea of individual and societal change. And you go step by step. It's a slow, gradual process. Now the young Brotherhood activists, this new generation, because the first, second, and third tiers of the Brotherhood have pretty much been in prison or pushed out into exile. So you have this new generation who are leading the protests in Egypt. They've adopted a much more revolutionary posture. But the Brotherhood doesn't do revolution well. So here's and this is why you also sense tensions between the younger guys who are still inside of Egypt and the Brotherhood leadership in exile in Istanbul, Doha, and London. But I think for now the leadership is following the sentiment on the ground, and they feel that they have really no choice but to kind of adopt this, to kind of go along with this revolutionary wave. I don't like to use the word radicalization because it's not suggesting a turn to violence, but it is suggesting a kind of radicalization and how these younger activists view the state. And I'll just kind of close on this point because I think it has a lot of implications going forward, is the Brotherhood before the Arab Spring, they had issues with the military and all of that, but there was a basic respect and deference for state institutions, the military, the judiciary, and Al-Azhar, yes, they had major criticisms, but they never talked about getting